received several questions. We have received several questions in advance of this presentation, and we will do our best to answer them as we go along. If during the course of the webinar, you would like to submit a question to one of the presenters, please go to the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. Although it is unlikely that we will be able to answer all of the questions received during the webinar, we will be posting a Q&A document on the AAS SBIR website along with this recording so that you may refer back to them at any time. You will also receive an email after the webinar with a copy of these slides and a link to a short survey. So my name is Danielle Grunwald, and I work within GSA's Office of Assisted Acquisition Services Program Management Office, or the AAS PMO. I will be facilitating this meeting today with our presenters, Dr. Rodney Couick, who is currently serving within the AAS PMO as a Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer, or SBIR Advisor. We also have Mr. Jim Ghiloni, the IDIQ Labs Group Manager at GSA's Federal Systems Integration and Management Center, or FedSIM. Next slide, please. Today, we will be providing a brief overview of AAS. We will also discuss the SBIR program and show you AAS's SBIR award data. We will talk about how you can work with AAS. And finally, we will discuss a potential multiple award IDIQ contract called the Research Innovation and Outcomes, or RIO concept, by providing some background on what it is, why there is a need for it, and what we've done so far. And then, of course, what we can do in the future. With that, I will turn it over to Rodney.
Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to all of the attendees. And it is our pleasure to share what GSA is doing with regards to assisting in the commercialization of SBIR STTR developed technologies. I'm going to first give a brief overview of assisted acquisition services in general. There may be some attendees who aren't familiar with what we do in assisted acquisition. What we basically do is we award and administer contracts on behalf of external customers on a fee-for-service basis, all kinds of contracts. So SBIR STTR contracts, we're doing a pretty big volume of those, as you're going to see later. However, that's just one part of what we do. We award and manage all sorts of contracts, primarily for research and development type services, technology development services, engineering services, professional services, IT services, things along those lines. But we're going to focus today on SBIR STTR. But since we're doing a lot of that work through assisted acquisition, that's the part I will be focusing on today. It's important for you to understand what assisted acquisition is and how we work. What we do is we provide full lifecycle acquisition support, typically beginning with initial discussions with a customer, or in the case of SBIR, a SBIR contractor, about a mission need, a requirement, and we put together a procurement package. We issue a solicitation, we conduct evaluations, we make awards, and then we manage those contracts for the life of the contract. And we charge for that to recover the cost of operating. We are 100% non-appropriated, part of the Federal Acquisition Service, which itself is non-appropriated. So we recover the cost of operating that service through various fees and surcharges. It's important to point out that the customer always owns the technical aspect of the requirement, and that's true of non-SBIR STTR, and I really want to make it a foot stomper when it comes to SBIR STTR, because the breadth of technology we support with SBIR is quite broad, and it is very unlikely that we at GSA are going to have the technical expertise needed to make for a successful contract. When it comes to SBIR, for phases 1 and 2, which we have done, we've actually done some phase 2 since we began the pilot program in 2018. We did a few phase 1s before then, but either way, we will operate as the contracting agent. So we will not issue the initial solicitation or make the technical selections. The participating agency does that, And then they hand us those documents and we move forward with awarding and managing the contract. For phase 3, though, we provide full lifecycle support. So before I go to the next topic, how can AAS benefit a small business, specifically in the SBIR STTR space? Well, if we're able to support the mission need, make the award on time, if we have the resources to do that, we're going to award a prime contract to that small business firm. So you will then have at least one tool in the toolbox when you go out and find another federal buyer by which you can tap into providing your SBIR goods or services. So it is a means of providing cash flow for you to keep you to serve as a bridge over that valley of death. We want to support as many as we can. We wish that we could support every inquiry we get, but I just want to mention that it's especially important as of right now. We're in May. We're already at capacity in GSA for new FY23 work, pretty much. And we have a queue already going into FY24. So we want to support as many as we can. We are having some struggle with capacity right now. I'll mention later that we're hiring. We need people. So if you know anyone with government acquisition background that you think might want to work with us, send them our way. I'm just going to introduce a very few basics about the SBIR program. I think almost everybody who is on the line today probably has an understanding of that, but I want to go over them again just to make sure. And I want to point out too that going forward in the briefing, we're simply going to refer to SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research. From a contracting point of view, for most practical purposes, everything that we would do for a STTR award would be the same. There are some differences between the SBIR and STTR program, which I refer you to the SBA's policy directive if you want to learn about those differences. But going forward, when I say SBIR, it means STTR as well. We use those synonymously going forward in the presentation. So this slide gives a brief history of the SBIR program. If you want to go to some more thorough tutorials on the subject, by all means, go to SBIR.gov and you'll be able to pull those down. I just want to point out that the program it's referred to by the SBA as America's Seed Fund. It has planted a lot of seeds for technology development since it came into existence. Per the SBA's website, there's over 200,000 awards that have been made to date, and the cumulative value is somewhere around $68 billion. That is a tremendous amount of seed money that is invested. Now, what are we doing in GSA? We are awarding primarily today phase 3 contracts and providing phase 3 solutions, which are a means of harvesting the fruit from all those seeds that have been planted for all these years. The program mission and goals, you can read more about those in the policy directive at www.sbir.gov. But at a high level, I want to point out just the main objectives, of course, to support the development of innovative technologies or innovative ways to use existing technologies, increase small business participation in federal R&D with focus on some particular classes of small business, and to increase the private sector commercialization. And for DoD focuses very heavily on technology transition. So maybe not as much for DoD sales to the private sector, but being able to put those technologies into the hands of the warfighter, into programs of record, and of course, to strengthen the US economy in doing all of this. So if you forget everything I said about the SBIR program, except this, please remember, it's not a contracting program. It is a technology and industrial-based development program. It is, of course, a 3-phase program. I'm sure most everybody is familiar with that that's attending today. We titled our presentation, How GSA is Helping to Bridge the Valley of Death. And that's a term that's used quite frequently these days. But when we use that term in the context of what we're doing at GSA, we are describing how to bridge a gap between the development of innovative technologies and the actual fielding or transition of those technologies into operators' hands or in the case of private sector, into private sector sales. So the valley of death that we're referring to is a gap. Sometimes small businesses can't survive that gap because they don't have funding to maintain their research expertise, to pay their employees, et cetera. So that's what we mean by valley of death. And how are we contributing to bridging that? We're awarding phase 3 contracts that enable companies to earn revenue on their SBIR developed goods and services and help them prosper. I want to point out about phase 1, 2, and 3, a few of the details there. Phase 1, of course, is typically a feasibility study. They're usually short, 6 to 9 months, maybe. The dollar value is usually below the simplified acquisition threshold, $250,000 or less. Phase 2, phases 1 and 2, by the way, are highly competitive. According to the SBA, historically, about 13% of applicants get a phase 1 contract, and then maybe a third of those get a phase 2 contract. So you can see it's a very competitive program to get a phase 1 contract and then a phase 2. A phase 2 is a larger contract, longer duration, usually to build a prototype, demonstrate a capability, test something that has potential for further use, et cetera. And phase 3, which we focus primarily on in today's presentation, is for work that derives from, extends, or completes work that has been funded in one or more prior SBIR STTR funded efforts. You can go directly from phase 1 to phase 3. You can go from phase 2 to phase 3. You can go from one phase 3 to another phase 3, et cetera. There are many very attractive aspects about using phase 3, and you can read more about those in the policy directive, but I'm just going to point out a few. No competition is required. No additional competition is required for a phase 3 contract. According to the law, the competition that occurred in phases 1 and 2 satisfy the competition requirements for phase 3. There's no limit to the size of a phase 3 contract. There's no limit to the number of phase 3 contracts that can be awarded, no limit to the duration. So it is a very attractive contracting tool by which we can bridge that valley of death and put innovative technologies into the hands of the warfighter. Here are some results that we've achieved in GSA today. The slide shows data from the time we began our pilot phase 3 program in May of 2018 through the second quarter of FY23. And as you can see, we have done a tremendous amount of work in the phase 3 space. In fact, we've moved the needle for all of government. And there are some reports out there that show that. If you want to follow up later, I can share that information with you. But we've awarded to date 94 contracts, about 60%, 40% IDIQ or indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts as opposed to standalone contracts. But look at the number of orders that we've placed under those IDIQ contracts. Almost 275. We have a total ceiling value now of really close to $10 billion, and we've obligated $2 billion to small businesses. That is jobs. That is employing people throughout this country, providing innovative goods and services, in our case, predominantly on behalf of the Department of Defense, but certainly open to the entire federal government. This slide shows the funding by agency, and you can see that Department of Defense is almost 100% of our funding to date, with the Air Force being the lead, the Navy pulling a close second, and actually the Navy is very interested in using GSA phase 3 contracts, and we see that Navy business continuing to expand and grow. We have very little civilian work to date, but there's no reason we can't support civilian agencies. We look forward to opportunities to serve civilian agencies with phase 3 solutions. So I've talked about assisted acquisition in general, sort of a very high level overview of how we work, what we do. I've talked about specifically what we do with regards to supporting the phase 3 mission and a bit about SBIR STTR in general, with an emphasis on phase 3. So how would you work with GSA for a SBIR contract? Now, this is broader than just phase 3, although most of our work is phase 3 to date. But suppose that you are a government customer, you're with the Air Force, the Navy, Department of Commerce, whoever, or you're a small business firm and you want to get a GSA SBIR STTR contract. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you reach out to us and we have a contact link there at the bottom. If you reach out to that link, someone will get back with you shortly and we will see if GSA is a good solution for what you need. We're going to need the SBIR history, whether it's a phase 1, 2, or 3. For a phase 1 or phase 2, we're going to need the participating agency solicitation documents, their selection documents, pretty much everything that has been done up to the point of reaching out to GSA to award and manage the phase 1 or 2 contract. If it's a phase 3, we're going to need the history of that firm up to this point. What are their phase 1 contracts, their phase 2 contracts? How many are we building? I look at a phase 3 sort of like a house. We're building it on a foundation of prior phase 1s and 2s and maybe 3s. We're going to need all that. We're going to need government requirement information, and we're going to need an engaged government technical point of contact. Government requirements, we're talking about work statements, we're talking about independent government cost estimates, funding documents, et cetera. Speaking of funding, we don't necessarily have to have the funding immediately, but we're going to need the funding pretty early in the process. Being a 100% fee for service organization, before we devote team members to do much heavy lifting on a contract, we're going to need that reassurance, at least, that the government customer funding is en route and will be in hand fairly early in the process. And then we're going to need some sort of evidence that the customer has their internal agency approval to use AAS. That varies from agency to agency. For some customers, it seems to be a bit more of a process than for others. We can help you to some extent, but that is a customer function. By all means, reach out to us and we will assist as we can. What are we working on now to improve our ability to do more of what we're doing? We believe that we're doing great things for our country. Our customers second that. Innovative small business seconds that as well. What are we doing to try to be able to do more? Well, first and foremost, our number one limiting factor right now is capacity to support new contract awards in a fairly rapid turnaround time. When we started in 2018, we could accept more new contract requests and turn them around quicker than we can now. And that's all because we need more people. So we are hiring. If you know anybody with government acquisition experience that you think would like to help us do what we're doing, please send them our way. We're also working on streamlining our internal processes, how we're organized to do the work. We're working with other agencies to identify maybe gaps in regulation and directives that drive unnecessary work, which adds time to awarding and managing contracts. And then finally, and something that I really believe is going to be a huge game changer, we're exploring a government-wide contract concept to facilitate rapid phase 3 ordering. And I'm going to turn the presentation over now to my colleague, Jim Ghiloni, who is not only an AAS expert, but he is leading the team that's establishing this new government-wide contract. So Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Rodney, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Ghiloni. I am the group manager for IDIQ Labs as part of the FedSim organization within AAS. And I just want to talk to you today about something we call RIO, Research, Innovation, and Outcomes. RIO, and we were asked the question online, where can you learn more? Here is where you learn more. And also on SAM.gov. RIO is an idea that we have for developing a multiple award IDIQ contract focused on SBIR phase 3. And I'll talk more about what it is and why as we go through. But as with any GSA potential contract vehicle, we have to go through a process to get that approved internally before we go out, especially a contract that we anticipate being available government-wide. And so about a year ago, we began an expansive market research initiative where we have we posted an announcement on sam.gov. We covered 39 NAICS codes, North American Industrial Classification System, NAICS codes, which represent different potential scopes of work, because the SBIR program writ large has a huge array of work done under it, products, services, both. We sent 12,000 emails out to a mailing list that we got from customer agencies, from SBIR.gov, as well as reaching out to various accelerators across the country. My team went to 10 different cities across the country that are hubs of SBIR activity to meet directly with over 300 companies. I could tell you the results of that market research, which is what I'm going to do, but I could say it's been overwhelmingly positive. I feel like there's a huge untapped market for SBIR phase 3s, as Rodney outlined. There's a great demand for that, and we're hoping that Rio can address some of those issues. So what did we find in our market research? And this will echo some of the topics that Rodney was alluding to earlier. While for SBIR phase 1 and phase 2, there are program offices in all of the SBIR agencies who are dedicated to helping spend that dedicated R&D funds on phase 1 and 2, there is no organized phase 3 program office in government. There's no government-wide champion for SBIR phase 3s. Since these are using program funds, not dedicated research funds, it's incumbent on program officials to execute or to seek the phase 3s. And what we've learned is that often program officials have no idea that SBIR even exists. The program recently was reauthorized for 3 more years, but the fact that it is continually, every periodically reauthorized by Congress is not permanent yet, if ever, does add some instability to the program. Those of you that are more experienced in federal contracting may have heard of the term best in class. This is a category of contract that designated by the Office of Federal Procurement Policy and typically managed by GSA that attempts to bring spend under management, identifying best in class contracts and encouraging agencies to use them where appropriate. There is no best in class contract related to SBIR phase 3s at all. And finally, what we learned is, as Rodney's numbers earlier indicated, that GSA AAS is responsible currently for about 25% of all phase 3 contracts. And that's a number that we're both proud of and that we would like to see go down. While I would like GSA's AAS SBIR work to continue to expand, it has expanded dramatically over the last years, as you saw previously, by growing the pie overall, by encouraging federal agencies to use this program more often, we would hope that while GSA's obligations increase, our percentage of the market will go down over time because our federal customers will be using SBIR authorities directly. And that's the heart of what Rio is all about, is providing a tool to federal agencies to directly make phase 3s in a comfortable, familiar way. Agencies understand how to place orders on GSA contracts. Contracting officers know how to do that. They do it on schedules. They do it on Alliant, they do it on Oasis, they do it on VETS, on STARS, GSA, GWACs. They know how to place a task order using FAR 16 for contract-minded folks, processes. While they may not know anything about SBIR, they know how to place task orders against existing IDIQs. If we can give our customer agencies a comfortable tool and a process that they're familiar with, we want to overcome a lot of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt surrounding the SBIR program, make it easier for them to do SBIR phase 3s. That's the heart of what we're about. So as we look across the landscape, we found, like I said, there are over 12,000 companies that won SBIR awards over the last 40 plus years. And these firms are typically ones that don't do business with the federal government, often get a question about whether you will need a GSA schedule to get a SBIR award, or a GSA schedule to get a Rio award in the future. And the answer is no. GSA schedules are designed for companies that are already doing business commercially, whereas a lot of these new and emerging firms don't have any commercial offerings, right? They're doing cutting edge research and developing prototypes of brand new solutions. And so all phase 1 and 2 companies are small businesses, and the vast majority of phase 3 companies are small businesses. The legislation does allow for succession of interest if another than small business acquires a company that has won phase 1 or 2, those rights convey. So there are some other than small businesses that are able to get phase 3s, but the vast majority are small businesses. And so supporting SBIR in general, supporting SBIR phase 3s and RIO specifically, adhere directly to administration priorities around emphasizing support for American small businesses. We had a question online about the mix of products and services, and here's some of the data we gathered, again, as we interviewed and collected data from over 300 SBIR companies currently doing business with the government. So in the middle, you see that the vast majority of these companies, provide, a plurality provide both products and services, and it's a fairly even split, relatively speaking. These are very small companies. You see more than 60, more than 50%, or fewer than 20 people. So not just small, but very small companies. And on the right side of the screen, you see that these are companies that are not, there's this myth of SBIR mills, or companies are just in it to kind of churn some business and sell out to a system integrator and cash in and then start the process over again. We found that companies we interviewed are in it for the long haul. They're looking to build capacity and capability and deliver services to the government in the long term, which we are very hard to find. So as we did this market research, what we found talking to industry were some common themes. There is no government-wide contract solution, the gap that RIO is intended to fill. We heard some horror stories about data rights being violated. Inherent to the SBIR program is a company retains the rights, intellectual property and data rights to the solutions they develop. We heard stories of contracting officers who don't understand that, requiring companies to give up their data rights to the government in return for an award, which is not the way this program should be run. We've heard about a lot of, again, CEOs have never heard of this program. Contracting officers have no experience with SBIR phase 3s. They don't know it. And if there's one thing many contracting officers are, it's risk averse, and they're not excited to try something brand new. Again, the value proposition for RIO is we'll give them a comfortable, familiar tool set that they do know how to use. Requiring offices don't know anything about SBIR. Companies, by the same token, don't know how to do business with the federal government. They have little to no experience with federal procurement. Things like labor rates and pricing agreements and financial accounting systems are foreign to them in many cases. Companies don't know how to find clients, and frankly, clients don't know how to find companies. And often, while they're getting a lot of direct support on the phase 1 and 2 from that SBIR program office, once the phase 2 is complete, companies are cut loose into the wild with little to no support. They don't know how to get a phase 3. So it's like I say, the Wild West out there in SBIR land. Talking to our customers, in addition to industry, we've met with every major SBIR agency. We've built a customer working group represented with representatives from those program offices. We've leveraged those connections to talk to program officials, contracting officials outside of the SBIR offices, but requirements owners. And what they tell us is that they don't know what's out there, that the relative immaturity of the companies they're dealing with results in, challenges in issuing and receiving proposals. Again, if the government asks you for, a price proposal based on labor rates, and you don't know what your labor categories are because you've never had to define a labor category, it's going to be very challenging for you to respond to that in a way that will be sufficient for government requirements. And again, with 40 years of topics and awards out there, it's very challenging for government customers to really even know what's available. So, as I mentioned, we're going through the process currently to develop RIO, a multiple award IDIQ contract for SBIR phase 3s that would allow agencies to directly issue task orders against that contract rather than having to go through GSA, for example, though GSA will also be leveraging RIO to facilitate its work. We have recently passed our first gate review, which was to present the results of our market research to our senior procurement executive. We had a number of very good questions, a number of things we need to consider as we move forward. Our current status is we're developing our acquisition plan, which will lay out how we're going to address all the challenges I discussed before, what this contract will look like, the way we're going to solicit and evaluate, and our plans for post-award risk mitigation and controls. As we move through this process, and once that acquisition plan is approved, which I hope will be sometime in June, we will then begin working towards a final solicitation. As anticipating that, we will conduct industry days across the country, currently targeting at least 3 in various locations, again, kind of hubs of potential SBIR activity. We will communicate through multiple mechanisms. There is a website called GSA Interact, just sort of like a bulletin board industry-facing website where GSA can share information. We use this very successfully, and when we developed Oasis, we will use it for Rio to share what our thoughts are and our plans are moving forward. We will leverage industry associations such as the Coalition for Government Procurement, ACT-IAC, Professional Services Council, and others to host events, conferences, webinars, etc. We can speak more about Rio, and we will continue to meet with companies one-on-one to gather feedback. All of that is designed to spread the word about Rio and to get customers excited about it and get industry ready for it. After award, we will continue to do everything we can to publicize this. We also want to host matchmaking events, live demonstrations, work with accelerators, put SBIR companies in front of system integrators and other large, industry, federal government contractors, because there's often a fairly robust program, or opportunity for subcontracting. So you will be seeing a lot of information. We'll be very engaged with industry as well as our customer community moving forward as we proceed to develop Rio. So this is the timeline and sort of the steps it takes for us to procure. It's not all inclusive, but just at a high level. We have conducted our market research and we are planning, as I say, for various posts, industry days, et cetera, moving forward. We are, once the acquisition plan is approved, again, that should be in mid-June, so right before the beginning of summer. Summer begins June 21st, not Memorial Day, as culture will tell you. We will then begin drafting solicitations, posting draft RFPs, putting the solicitation out. We will evaluate in the fall, and our hope is to award Rio by the end of the calendar year. Now, our vision for Rio and everything I'm telling you is subject to debate. It's subject to change, I should say, as we go through the process. But our current vision is we'll make an initial set of awards, again, by the end of the year. But we will have what we're calling an on-ramp on demand. My team calls it the Rio Speedwagon. I don't know if that's official or a copyright violation, but the RIO Speedwagon will be our mechanism to onboard companies after the initial award. So if you're not part of the initial slate, even the day after we announce awards, if you have a customer who is willing to sign a letter of intent, has program funds that they are willing to award to you in a phase 3, we will evaluate very quickly, within a matter of days, your proposal, validate that you are, capable, that you are not foreign owned, et cetera, the various, capability check marks that go into a Rio award. We'll validate your phase 1 and 2 awards, and we will issue you a Rio contract. We will also provide DPA, that stands for Delegation of Procurement Authority training, to the customer organization so that their contracting staff can place awards directly. This again is the vision for Rio, is that an agency a contracting officer in, say, the Navy, the Air Force, or DHS can receive a delegation to place task orders against Rio using FAR 16 familiar task order processes, again, direct awards, very quickly. So this is not something where if you miss it, you miss the boat, you got to wait 3 years for an on-ramp, or you're locked out for years. We will make this contract very accessible to companies, provided there are customers that are interested in doing business with them. And we will do, like I say, matchmaking events and gather and share information, around technical capabilities on our website to make it very easy for customers to see what's out there and find the right companies to provide services. So I've seen some questions in the chat around the solicitation. I would say in the fall, late summer, early, let's say summer ends September 20th. So somewhere very late summer, early fall, I would expect the final RFP for Rio. I'm just going to scroll the questions. I think that's my last slide. And so we have time for Q&A. I'm just going to address a couple things in the Q&A, and then I'll tap Rodney in to address some things as well. I know he wants to talk about government-wide champion. I'll just say before he does, if there is a government-wide champion for SBIR, it's Dr. Rodney Couick. He has been exemplary in advertising this program and spreading it throughout government. Brian, you've asked if phase 1 is pre-qual for Rio, likely a phase 1 or 2. I don't know if it's both, but certainly you will need to have got phase 1 or 2 awards to win a Rio contract. And Connie, that's the answer to your question as well. Is you'll need to demonstrate that you've won phase 1s and 2s, because you can't get a phase 3 otherwise. And Rio is focused on phase 3 awards. So Rodney, I'm going to tap you in while I scan through the questions, see if there's anything else in my bailiwick.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And thank you everyone for all the questions. And I know we've gotten a lot of questions. We will provide answers to all of them. Obviously, we won't have time to do that today during the session, but we will provide a written response where we're collecting the questions and give you answers to those. But I do want to address one that I saw come up a couple of times regarding government-wide champion. And I want to make sure everybody has a clear understanding of what GSA's role is. GSA, because we've awarded many phase 3 contracts and we have contributed to our national security and success and company growth, et cetera. There are a lot of people who think maybe that we run the SBIR program or something like that. We do not. We are not a participating agency at all, which means that GSA does not fund any phase 1 and 2 work. We are a contracting agency. What we do, so we are a champion for government-wide contract solutions. They just make a lot of sense. It's a whole lot easier to order from an existing contract than it is to write a new contract. So when we award an assisted acquisition, a phase 3, we are going to try to, if we can support it with appropriate rationale, award an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. That will allow the immediate customer to meet their mission needs, but it will also facilitate ordering by other customers down the road. That is simply more streamlined and a lot faster than doing a standalone contract for every requirement. So we are a champion for government-wide use of contracts because it makes sense, it's more streamlined, it's more efficient. We also champion the objectives and the intent of the SBIR program because we're federal servants, we're public servants, and we want to see our nation succeed when it comes to the objectives of the SBIR program. So are we a champion? Yes, but the program falls under the Small Business Administration and the participating agencies with regards to how the program is executed. That's the only question, Jim, that I saw that I wanted to answer live, other than questions we may get from attendees going forward. And I know we've got a lot of questions on the list.
Go ahead, Rodney. You can go ahead and
some of those, but you go.
Yeah,
ahead.
you scan through. There's some there I'm leaving for you, but I'll take a few of them off the top here. John Jordan asks about a tool. The only tool that currently exists that I'm aware of to really gather good info on SBIR Sitter is SBIR.gov. The link is on the screen here. There's a database. It's got a lot of data in it. I don't know, we had to buy a new laptop for our people to parse that data properly. It's a lot of 40 years worth of data, but there's a lot of information about topics, about usage, in addition to general information about the program itself, all the phases, the process, and the open topics. So SBIR.gov is the single go-to place right now for information generally about SBIR and STTR. That's it. We would like to build additional resources as part of Rio. And again, as part of that function of being a government-wide focus area for SBIR. But we'll have to kind of see how that evolves over time. Our initial focus is getting the contract awarded, and then we'll develop tools to support. Naveen asks if we have matchmaking sessions planned. Not yet, but we will. Certainly after award, a large focus of our Rio program office will be matchmaking, formal and informal, and developing some sessions around that. So stay tuned on that. Let's see. Constance asked how you can add contractors after Rio is awarded. As of now, again, everything is subject to change. Nothing is official until the RFP is issued. But our plan is that we will be able to on-ramp companies after award, as I said, on demand, use the Speedwagon. If you have a customer that has a letter of intent and you qualify according to the qualifications defined in the RFP, we will be able to issue you a contract after award very quickly, so that you can then we'll train the customer organization, give them delegation so that they can procure using Rio. That's the theory that we're working on. Howard asks if you could bring it up at agencies and departments. I think there is some visibility in SBIR program offices, but really not broadly. At this point, I don't, if you're talking to agencies, you may let them know this is going to be available, but given that nothing's going to be awarded till the end of the calendar year, it's a little premature. We will do a full court press communications plan with customer agencies as we get closer to award. We'll work very closely with the customer working group that we've developed, which is all the DoD entities that use SBIRs as well as civilian agencies. So we'll be doing that outreach, and we'll also share some FAQs and talking points, one-pagers with you in industry that you can use to communicate with your customers. So that's another sort of stay tuned. We're a little early. Don't want to get them all ramped up for it until it's sort of officially out there on the street. We still have a couple gates to get through before we're at that point. Hannah, hello, Hannah. You ask if future phase 1s and 2s would be rolled onto the offerings, and that is our current intent. Is any future phase 1 and 2s that a company that holds a RIO contract receives would be added to their catalog of services, as it were. And so you would have a single RIO contract that would cover all of your phase 1s and 2s, both at time of award and moving forward into the future. I'll just scoop if I've got anything else here. Will RIO enable any program in the government? Yes. Andrew asks if any federal government could do the phase 3, even if it wasn't the one that issued the topic. That is correct. It does not matter what entity of government issued the phase 1 or 2. So if you had an AFWorks phase 1 or a phase 2 award, at EPA could issue you a phase 3 award as long as it connected directly to that phase 1 or 2. So it makes it available to the entire government. So that's I think a huge benefit to RIO. That's actually, it's not unique to RIO. That happens now, but that's certainly something that is potential. RIO task orders, they're likely, answering Chris Just's question, they'll operate similar to GSA schedules, OASIS, Alliant, other direct award vehicles that GSA has. There's likely to be an industrial funding fee or contract access fee embedded that industry would remit through pay.gov behind the scenes. We don't know what that is, likely to be somewhere between 0.2 and 0.75. There's a kind of a bit of variety within GSA of what those fees are, but it would be remitted by industry behind the scenes. It would not be a direct charge to the customer. And that goes to sort of pay our bills in the RIO program. Let's see. Nevin, you asked, can you respond to the RFI? Yeah, you can always respond to an RFI, even if it's past the due date. We get interested in your information, and it's just an RFI. So the more information we get, the better. Let's see.
Take a few, Jim.
Yeah, you go ahead. I think I'm good for now.
Okay. I'll just start at the top of the questions I still see open here. Ross asked, we completed a first phase 2, are about to start a second phase 2 for a single topic. It feels too early to start the phase 3 process now, but when would be the right time to start? The right time to start phase 3, let me remind you again, phase 3, sort of forget 1, 2, 3, how we learned to count. Phase 3 is about the work to be performed and how it's funded. The only difference in many respects between a phase 3 and a phase 2 in some situations is how it's being funded. Phase 3 must be funded entirely by non-SBIR STTR money. So if you have completed at least one phase 1 or phase 2, and you have a government customer that wants to spend program money to do work that derives from, extends, or completes, that becomes by definition of phase 3. So start as soon as you have a government customer that wants to buy what you have to offer, or build upon that. Andrew asked, how close does a phase 3 product need to match the phase 1 product? Often a phase 1 will result in a modified phase 3 contract. Again, phase 3 is for work that derives from, extends, or completes. And those terms are pretty broad. Completes is the narrowest of the 3. And that basically means you started something with SBIR STTR funding. You didn't quite finish, and the customer wants to spend program money to finish it or complete it, bring it to the point that it's ready for the market or ready for transition. That would be a phase 3. derives from and extends are even broader. So it is key to be able to map the development of the technology from the original phase 1 concept to what is being done on the phase 3 contract. So, without specifics, that's a difficult question to answer definitively, but the terms are pretty broad. But you do need to show a clear path from that original technology idea to what is being done on the phase 3. Karen asked, given that we have a 6-month timeline, someone asked earlier, it may have been Karen, I'm sorry, I forget the name. How long does it take to get an AAS phase 3 contract? Well, that depends on the complexity, the size of the contract, the nature of what we're buying, and how much capacity GSA has at the time that you come into the queue. Earlier, a couple of years ago, it was pretty common to be doing fairly large contracts in the 90 to 150 day time range. Now it's probably more like 6 months. And that's not because it takes our people that much more time to do the same thing, but they're working on 275 active orders at the same time that they're establishing a new contract. Oh, reminder, we're hiring. If you know anybody with government acquisition background, send them our way. We need more people so that we can turn these around quicker. That being said, the question is about funding. And I mentioned that we need the funding pretty early in the process. Well, for DOD, it is oftentimes, or probably most of the time, the DOD customer does not have the funds in hand when we begin working. But we do receive a copy of a draft MIPR or other funding document with a reassurance from the customer's finance activity that the funds are being processed and they will be to you, estimated time of arrival, X date. And our project team will work with you. I mean, that's not a hard requirement that we have the funding in hand, because for DOD, most of the time, it simply would not work. So for a specific requirement, we will work with you. We do need assurance that the funding will be arriving in time, because if we put our team, our capacity is spread thin today, we put them to work on a contract, they work for 2 months, the funding doesn't come in, then we don't get a contract, which is a huge impact to you, to the company, and to the mission, but also I've lost 2 months of time that those people could have been working on a funded contract. So that's important. And as a taxpayer, you want us to make sure that we're supporting efforts that will be funded. Ross asked, if I could only pick one, should I pursue POM or phase 3? Again, phase 3, if your technology goes into the POM, the Program Objective Memorandum for a Defense Department to fund, and they want to make that award to your company for work that derives from, extends, or completes, then it becomes by definition a phase 3. So whether you have a standalone phase 3 contract or you have a subcontract to a DoD prime, and that's important, you should make sure as a SBIR firm that if you have a subcontract to a DoD prime and you're doing phase 3 work, you should be entitled to phase 3 rights and status. Have we done any work with Defense Intelligence Agency? Yes, in general, and I'm quite confident when it comes to SBIR, but I'm not positive on SBIR. Okay, David asked, who makes determination on the viability of a new phase 3, GSA, AAS rep, or customer organization CO? When you come to assisted acquisition, we're going to do the contracting on behalf of the government customer. Sometimes customer organization contracting offices may be involved to some extent, but they are not doing the contracting. So ultimately, the acquisition responsibility will rest with the GSA contracting officer, but we're going to require technical information from the government program that's funding the effort. So we're going to require them to assist us in showing that this is indeed a product that, or service that derives from, extends, or completes. Let me see what else we get in here. What's required to get into the GSA SBIR phase 3 queue from Gary? Please go to the briefing. There's a link there that you can reach out to us, and we will respond to you and hopefully be able to get you into the queue for a phase 3 contract. What is our fee? Somewhere between 3 and 5% most of the time. As we look back historically, it's about 3.5%, but historic look back is reflecting all the ordering we've done, and those are funded. When we start a new contract, especially an IDIQ, The contract may be huge. The initial funding may be small. So it's not uncommon to start a new contract maybe in the 4 to 5% range. We also charge at the order level. If the Navy's ordering, they should pay us for the commensurate work that we do to support them. If the Air Force is ordering and the order is different, doesn't require as much work or requires more, they should pay more or less appropriately. I do want to point out too a big difference between assisted acquisition and the direct buy model that Rio will support. When you do an assisted acquisition order, we're doing all of the heavy lifting on the contract. So you're paying for many, many hours of GSA non-appropriated personnel's time along with their overhead rates. So that's why the fee with assisted acquisition will be different than it will if there's a direct order with a contract like Rio. So for a direct order, let's say you go in, your customer is Navy. Navy goes into their contracting officer, says, yep, we're comfortable with placing a phase 3 order. The Navy won't send a funding document to GSA to do that. They're simply going to use a GSA vehicle, and that vehicle will have some funding fee as Jim mentioned earlier. If, on the other hand, they go in and their office cannot support awarding the contract, and you come to GSA and say, we want you to do that on our behalf, we're going to charge a fee that is commensurate with the level of effort required to award that and manage that contract and to spend. So that's why our fees are fundamentally different in the way they're administered and determined than when you do a direct buy from something like Rio. How do we stack phase 3 requests? It's first come, first serve. We do not serve. This is David's question. We're not buying on behalf of GSA. So we're serving all federal customers in the first come, first serve with regards to what we can support. It's all about our capacity. Let's see here. Importance or criticality of the requirement to the warfighter or operations. Again, we're American citizens, and that's very important to us. But we are supporting the entire federal government. And again, it's first come, first serve. And actually, that's a benefit of assisted acquisition. When I was in the Air Force, the biggest program got the support. And if I was the little guy, I had to wait, maybe never get the support. When you come to assisted acquisition, once we make a commitment to you and we have an agreement with you, we're going to deliver within our power to do so. So you're not going to get out prioritized by a more important program because we're not working on behalf of GSA. Phase 3 ceilings, 100 million, initial TO 500K. How much do we want to see before comfortable moving forward? This is Mary Claire's question. We need good rationale to establish a contract ceiling. It's not uncommon for us to have an initial TO in the range of 500K for a big phase 3 contract. Jim, you want to take a couple questions?
I think we're just about done with questions. The only
Okay.
one that I see left is about the SBC. I don't know what the SBC is. If you do, you can address it. Otherwise, we'll
small
respond.
business concern. I'll take it.
Okay.
That's small business concern. And when it comes to an assisted acquisition contract, the customer funding agency will pay. They will pay the fee and for services. When it comes to a direct order like Rio, the concept is different. There's a funding fee that is typically assessed to the company. Is that correct, Jim? On the funding fee?
Yeah, if those of you familiar with the GSA schedules program, there's what they call the industrial funding fee. It's less than 1%. It's 0.75 on schedules. Other GSA contracts, it's lower. That is remitted by industry. It's basically just another similar like overhead, M&A, et cetera. It's another indirect fee as part of your cost proposal, and you would remit that on periodically. I think it's monthly or quarterly to GSA using pay.gov. But we'll have all that information and instructions on that process as part of Rio contract and training for industry post-award. So Danielle, I think I hand it back to you at this point. Or to Stephanie.
I think that sums up all of our Q&A for today. Thank you all for your active participation and questions. As Danielle mentioned at the beginning, we will be able to share the slides with you all along with a brief survey. Thank you again, and the content will also be posted online. Thanks for joining, everyone.